Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this sword right here. This is the Magnificent Chu Jian from LK Chen, and a couple disclaimers right at the get-go. One, this is a review sample sent to me from LK Chen for the purposes of my reviewing shenanigans. That means I didn't spend any money on it, so if you think that makes me biased, you know right at the get-go. Two, I don't study Chinese swordsmanship or history, and I'm not really all that smart, so keep that in mind as you're hearing me ramble about how good or bad this thing is. A bit of a spoiler alert right at the get-go. I think this is a fantastic sword. LK Chen has been very generous in the types of samples that they've sent me, and a number of swords that they've sent have actually been very nimble and fun in the hand, but I don't think any has been or made quite as much an impression on me as this sword has in terms of dynamics and fun and some of the cool bits that LK Chen has to offer. So I do think this is a great sword. Right now it's selling for about $370 on their website, and I would strongly recommend you take a look at it if you're considering getting one. I think it's a fantastic sword, and I will hopefully elaborate as to why that is in the rest of this video. I don't know how well it's going to hold up to abusive stuff or general shenanigans or frankly sword-related activities because I've used it very, very little. That said, that will come in part 2, so I'll reserve my final thoughts for the part 2 video. At the moment, though, I think it is an exceptional sword in terms of how it moves around and overall aesthetics and things like that. So anyway, on with the why that actually is. I'm going to start with the pommel right here, and this is hard for me to talk just about the pommel as a piece because it's kind of fitted into the grip in such a way that it seems like it's connected to the grip in more ways than just physically being connected. But the grip turns into a slight cylinder towards the end of the pommel, and this pommel, while it looks like just kind of a coin stuck on the bottom, has got a little bit of depth and dimension to it. One, it has the artistic embellishment kind of circular bits at the bottom, which I appreciate, but the chamfered edges, none of it bites into my hands, and the way it fits into the grip, your hand kind of naturally rests pretty well. So I would think this would slide off easily enough. It doesn't. It actually feels really comfortable and secures well in the hand. Now, I don't necessarily have a lot of ease getting two hands on it, but if you were to use your hand towards the bottom of the grip, it's a comfortable enough experience, honestly, and I don't know if that's intentional or not, but suffice to say, it's a comfortable place to put it. Now, other people have mentioned that the pommel is flat, so you can thrust thusly. I don't know how effective that is or isn't, honestly, but what I can say is that, one, artistically speaking, it's handsome looking. It doesn't have embellishments on the other direction, though, so there's no kind of anything around the rim or on the flat of the blade. I would think that if it were adorned more elaborately, that those would be on either side. Functional wise, it's very comfortable on the hand, and in terms of, as you see the larger coin section of the flat of the pommel here, it certainly has some embellishments, and none of them are sharp, none of them are jutting or bad or anything like that, and whether or not I guess you like it is subjective, but functionally it actually fits pretty good in the hand. Unfortunately, there's not really much to say. This is a very small stopper type pommel. It doesn't really do much in terms of counterbalance or weight, and there's not much to talk about other than that. So I will move on to the grip itself. The grip, again, something I really think is well designed and well thought out. Towards the crossguard area, it is more elliptical. It has these kind of slight risers that appear to be made out of the paracord or silk kind of cord that's on here. They don't move around. It's very easy to index in this section of the blade where it's elliptical. It fits into my hand. The paracord kind of riser areas here, the silk risers, I don't think it's made of the paracord. It appears to be silk, and it's a reasonable kind of silk, I guess. It doesn't feel cheap and kind of sticky, but it's also, cord. So anyway, my hands fit well on here, and the risers do well to give me a sensation of getting better grip or better purchase. As it winds down, it becomes a cylindrical area right here, and so my hand can kind of naturally rest in several different places on the grip while simultaneously feeling secure. It doesn't feel great to have two hands. It's possible, but it doesn't necessarily feel natural. Perhaps if you study Chinese martial arts, it will feel natural to you. Anyway, suffice to say, the fact that it's elliptical up here and then turns into a cylindrical and then widens out, it has a very easy kind of self-intuitive way of gripping and handling the sword that's really easy to find a comfortable spot regardless of how inept you might be with swords and swordsmanship. Also, right underneath the guard, I can kind of make out that there's a slight spot where there appears to be some sort of Samegawa ray skin, something like that. I don't know if that is what it is, but I will find out when I break the sword apart. Anyway, the grip, excellent. The crossguard area here, again, there's some notes that around the rim, underneath, and on the top, there's no adornments, but on the flats, kind of the crossguard area that's facing you, there are some decorations, and they serve multiple purposes in terms of at least how I found to move them around. One, the additional little adornments here are not sharp in such a way that they cause me any distress on my skin, but I can use them to kind of get traction. So if I want to hold it with my thumb, and if I'm cutting and I'm placing my thumb on the guard, there's a natural place for my thumb to rest and add additional control and kind of security to the blade. So these adornments do offer some level of additional purchase or grip on the actual blade itself. Additionally, I will note that the casting quality on here seems precise in some ways and inaccurate in others. There's little bobs and little bits of imperfection that haven't been cleaned off. It looks like these were cast and then kind of wire brushed or cleaned up in a more industrial capacity rather than individually. So there are details, I think, that are missing or imperfect, but overall I think it is a very, very handsome presentation. There's no adornments on any other side of the guard, and also it's worth noting that the crossguard has a pretty large gap where it meets the blade. I will say that the presentation to me, maybe it's that it's a Chinese sword and I don't really have a whole lot of expectations for it, or maybe preconceived notions of what it should be. It's a big gap, which is something I would normally ding on a European sword or a Japanese sword, but on this particular sword it seems maybe natural. I don't think it necessarily is off-putting in the same way. The guard appears even, the transitions appear good, but the crossguard area does have a pretty wide gap where the blade meets the guard. Water and bits and bobs could get in there and potentially be hard to clean. So I suppose know that. I don't know if that's intentional. Again, this I think is supposed to be representative of a historical artifact. Maybe that's the way they were made historically. I guess I don't really know. As a modern buyer, I always have concerns that if I cut water bottles or other dumb shit in my backyard, that the stuff is going to get down there, rust the blade out, and be in a spot where I can't easily clean it off. So I like to see very firm areas where the crossguard meets the very, very small tolerances between the crossguard and the blade. That doesn't appear to be the case here, but it doesn't seem unnatural for what it's worth. All right, I'm going to talk about the scabbard now, and there's a lot to really enjoy here. One, it has this kind of diamond section or maybe hexagonal section here that transfers down and becomes more cylindrical towards the tip when it meets this large metal fitting towards the bottom. Overall, it's really well lacquered. It has some artistic embellishments on the scabbard itself, though there are little spots that appear to be like almost touch-up paint. I'm not sure what to make of them, if they are intentional, if that's placed there, or if it was like there was an imperfection and they decided to try and touch it up with a completely different color red. It's mostly the red that seems to have it. I guess I don't know, but it does seem off in terms of the design. The little belt section here doesn't move around. I can kind of pull on it and twist it. It doesn't move, though I haven't mounted it to my belt. It does seem relatively secure. The brass fittings as well have some pitting and stuff on them, so again, it looks like it's been cast and then cleaned up, but there's minor imperfections in the surface of the castings here, and maybe that adds to the somewhat handmadeness of the sword. I'm not entirely sure. To me, it seems like casting imperfections, but they're, I don't know, something you have to notice more anally. The surface of the lacquer is, again, small imperfections, things like that, but overall the surface is reasonably clean. In a Japanese sword, this would be considered rather bad. I can make out kind of the lines in the wood. There's little spots where it's bubbled, but I don't know that it necessarily fits the same criteria. To me, though, this doesn't seem bad, and at least it has a consistent surface to it, so nothing inherently jumps out as a flaw more than the kind of odd bits in the paint, which I guess I don't know if are intentional or not. Again, I really like the shape moving from kind of what appears to be more of a diamond section to a rounded section, right around the same point that the blade tapers down. There's a noticeable kind of shift in the blade geometry about 2/3 up the blade, and the scabbard kind of follows the same way. I happen to really like that kind of artistic fit. The little end cap at the end here, there's one piece that I do want to note. One, it has these ledges, and that feels like it could catch on something. I'm sure it's intentional and historic and whatnot, but to me it seems like I'm going to catch this. If it was in my belt moving around, this would be a ledge that could catch on things and make me knock things over. So anyway, there's that to note. It has the same inconsistencies in casting, minor imperfections, minor pitting, minor little bits that you might have gripes about, but overall it's not inherently bad and has decoration, at least on the flats here. On the bottom of the blade, or on the bottom of this metal fitting, it doesn't have really much of anything, so it seems like a missed opportunity to add some sort of additional embellishment there. As it is, though, this scabbard is pretty sturdy, so much so that like it feels like you could in tandem use it with the weapon as something to deflect and stab. I'm not sure if that was the design behind it, but it does feel like a sturdy, robust scabbard. My only complaint in terms of the scabbard would be the actual fit. Now, bear in mind that in Minnesota it is very cold right now. I've kept this in plastic. It just hasn't changed in terms of humidity and whatnot particularly well. Initially, when I got this sword, it drew just fine, but as it is right now, if I put it any more in, it'll actually get stuck. And when I went to go draw it before doing this video and taking some of the measurements, it was actually stuck in there quite a bit. I couldn't pull it apart. I actually had to brace this on the floor and then try to pull up very gingerly so I didn't cut myself. And when I stick the sword in, if I put it in too far, it's so tight that I'm kind of nervous about actually breaking the scabbard apart and cutting into the flub of my hands. So the scabbard is a bit tight, but again, that might be because of the weather and because I left the scabbard inside of plastic and maybe it didn't get enough chance to breathe and kind of change with the weather. So we'll see how it goes. At the moment, though, it seems really tight, and there's about a 1/4 inch gap between the crossguard and the blade itself, or rather the scabbard itself. A 1/4 inch blade sticking out between the scabbard and the crossguard. If I put it in anymore, it just doesn't want to come out. It's already very tight, and I want to say that during the summer months it fit really, really well. Nothing, it had a mild bit of tension, but nothing quite as stern as what it is right now. Anyway, that would be about my only complaint. I do know that this again came in the first batch of LK Chen swords. They've gone through a couple of revisions in terms of the adhesive and things like that and temperature changes, so perhaps this is something that they've addressed, though it is worth noting that it's a concern right now. If I tried to draw this while it was sheathed in the summer, well, it would be quite a thing to do, quite a dangerous operation, because you have to pull on it really, really hard to get it out. Other bits to note, the little brass bit at the bottom has not come loose or undone, and I did actually tug on it pretty vigorously to try and get that little SOB out of the scabbard when I was doing this video. Anyway, onto the blade itself. Now, this is just kind of the part that makes it spectacular. There's so much to look at. Now, it has the folded steel that LK Chen puts on a number of their swords, and it's certainly very pleasant to look at, though honestly it seems like it's used in a number of different forges out there, so I don't know how special or bespoke it is. In terms of patterning, though, it certainly gives you something to look at, but that isn't really what makes this sword special. I mean, honestly, like all the fittings and things like that, given that they're not in my general wheelhouse, while I find them handsome, they don't inherently draw me in. It's really the feeling that I get from this blade and the details that I start to see in it. One, this strong central ridge runs all the way up the blade. There are some hollow ground kind of bevels put in. There's 2 pronounced secondary bevels along the hollow ground edge, which is pretty common for a hollow ground blade. And then all the way up at the tip, there's a slight kind of bolster where it swells out to give you a reinforced tip. Right around 2/3 the way up the blade, it kind of transitions and has a step down. There's just a lot of complex geometry here, as well as, there's a taper going this way with a pronounced step about 2/3 up, and then there's distal taper, as we say, running the length of the blade, and then it expands up to bolster the tip. There's just a lot of complex geometry going on here. Now, is it perfect? No, there's a lot of surface ripples in the kind of hollow ground areas of the blade, indicating that it was probably done on some sort of sander by hand. But as it is, what the result is an extremely lively blade. This is not short, and it appears rather stout, but it feels absolutely fantastic in the hand. It's easy to index, it's easy to get point control. This is just an extremely comfortable, wonderful blade to hold. Now, it's not as intuitive as the Royal Arsenal Dao was. That is one that just, I think you could hand to anybody that's held a stick before and they would intuitively know what to do. This is marginally more complex than that, but really not much so. This kind of naturally feels, as a guy that likes swords and swings them around a lot but doesn't study Chinese swordsmanship, this feels instantly comfortable. It's an amazing sword to look at. It's fun in terms of the folding, it's fun in terms of the geometry, and it's absolutely wonderful in terms of the dynamic and balance. It's just really, really, really fun to hold. So I think Magnificent actually fits the name, the kind of the name of the sword. It's a lot. There's a lot to look at, a lot to appreciate, and I think really you get a lot. So for $370, which is at least the going rate of this sword, there's some features in here that you get that I do feel are special. So folded steel, maybe that suits your fancy, or maybe it doesn't. But the hollow ground blade geometry, as well as this kind of somewhat, consistent distal taper, seems to be what LK Chen puts in a number of their swords. They do have a pretty good idea of shaping and geometry of swords, but this somewhat complex geometry, to have hollow ground edges, to have a step 2/3 of the way down the blade, to have straight edges, to have all this going on in a sword that's $370 seems rather impressive to me, especially when it's executed in such a way that it feels good, which this definitely does. Now, how well that translates to cutting, I have really no idea. I haven't cut with it. Other people have. They seem to do it quite successfully. I have not. This does feel sharper than some of the other LK Chen swords that I've had. It's sporadic, though. In some spaces, it's a little duller. In some spaces, it feels like it's going to do a great job cutting. So I don't know yet. It's cold out. I don't want to cut things right now. But when I get around to cutting things, I will tell you how well it holds up. At the moment, though, there's a lot going on here that really impresses me and makes me feel like for $370, this is a great deal. I generally am not terribly interested in Chinese swords from a collector and practitioner standpoint. Again, I've noted I don't study Chinese swordsmanship, and I tend to have a propensity to collect either European, Filipino, or Japanese swords. But if there were one offering from LK Chen that would kind of scratch a number of itches for me, it would probably be this one. It feels intuitive in the hand. It feels really, really good. It has a familiar shape to me in some regards. It has a lot to look at from a collector, kind of different geometry perspective, and it feels just really, really spectacular in the hand. There's just so much to admire and enjoy about this sword that I think it's a winner from LK Chen. Things that I could suggest in terms of fittings and things like that. I understand that this is probably modeling a historic piece. The fit on the scabbard, the little ledges towards the end, that might knock things over. Embellishments and opportunities to improve the casting quality, as well as perhaps adorn the other locations on the scabbard. But things I wouldn't change. This blade geometry seems tops, and while I could complain about the polish, I would rather have the hollow ground edges than flat edges, because that's kind of the feature to me. The distal taper, as we call it, I think is really well done, and the handle as well. I wouldn't change much of anything. Well, this cord, maybe could be more elaborate or something. For the moment, it's held up really well. I've handled this several times, and it feels really excellent in the hand. I don't know that there's honestly much I would change. Overall, this is a great sword, and I've been looking forward to reviewing it. I wish I could cut things with it and kind of show you how durable it is or isn't. But at the moment, I think that this has just a lot of cool stuff that I've really enjoyed kind of taking out and swinging around quite a bit. So hopefully what I've shown you so far has given you some something to think about, some level of interest or not. Hopefully it's given you some idea. I mean, forgive my enthusiasm for it. To me, it feels like a great sword. To me, it feels like there's a lot offered here. If that's not the same to you, then no worries. But hopefully the visuals, hopefully the measurements and all that in the description down below have offered something that's helped you make a decision on it. I will do a part 2 to this video. Again, it's going to be included probably several months. I'll link it in the description down below. Depending on when you watch it, it may or may not be available. But for the moment, it is not, because it's very cold outside. And if I go outside and cut things with it right now, it's going to freeze, because it's like 20 below when I'm recording this. And that might not give the steel really a fair shake, particularly with a thinner blade like this. It might make it quite a bit more brittle than it would be, and I'm venturing to guess that most of you are not cutting in temperatures of 20 below. So anyway, that's what I've got so far. I'll reserve my final thoughts until I actually get a chance to really put it through its paces. But for the moment, I think this is a very compelling offering from LK Chen, and one that I've kind of been anxious to review. It feels like a really good sword. Between the Royal Arsenal, there's another Dao that I've been playing around with from LK Chen that also feels really good, and this Magnificent Chu Jian. Those have been there's a few of them that just feel kind of magical in the hand, and this certainly happens to be one. Not as much as the Royal Arsenal. That one just feels like kind of an easy button to swordsmanship. It feels inherently, it just feels like a twig in your hand, like you're a boy in the backyard again with a stick sword. This is marginally more complicated, but honestly not much so. It feels really good in the hand to me. So anyway, I'm rambling. I'll call it here and say that's all I've got for you. And anyway, as always, cheers and thanks for watching.